I don't
We're
know. I'd
live.
never heard of it, but yep, I just went live. But yeah,
Okay.
so there's that. Um, all right. Wait for this to show us. Yeah, that went live very fast today.
Yeah, it did. I was like 2 minutes early. Okay, so
I know.
curious to see what
Second.
banter comes out of it. Okay. So, okay. Yeah,
Do you know where
definitely
you're
gonna be
kicking us off
interested.
today?
Huh?
Do you know where you're kicking us off today?
Do I?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I do.
There you go. Because we don't have to plan anymore. It's just so easy with you guys. It's like, let's just have a call. Like we'll figure out for next quarter, we'll probably cover stuff we already, covered, but it makes it
Hey,
so easy.
I love it.
I know, we do too.
Yes, we're
These,
very
these, oh,
honored to have you yet again, and
yeah.
also for providing valuable insights. There's a difference in talking to various different hiring and recruiters in the field that just talk generics, but you actually talk about concrete examples and advice, and that's helpful. I think that's helpful to a lot of people that are in the job
Mhm.
market right now. So that's why they keep tuning in.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I try to be as transparent as I can. I mean, that's to me the point, right?
And
Yeah.
we've got people starting to join, which is great. We're still a minute. Like, I cannot believe how quickly it signed us on to be live. So we really started early today. But, oh, I will put my phone on silent.
That's a good reminder, just in case.
Well, you know what happens is because I'm on my Mac. So
It'll
anytime
ring on
something comes in,
yeah.
everything freezes because it's my iPad, it's my iPhone, it's my Mac that I'm computer on, and my Apple Watch. So just no one can hear me. Everything just freezes when anything comes in.
And
So
Cynthia, first, as usual, perfect. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone around the world. Happy Friday.
it is Friday. It's beautiful out. Elias and I are facing record heat in Colorado today. We're in the
It's
80s
wild.
this week and weekend. And last weekend it snowed. So we got like a foot of snow. It was melted the next day, and now we're in the 80s.
Yeah.
All right.
Mid 80s tomorrow, I think, which is crazy for March in Colorado.
I'm hoping to be able to wash the dogs if I have time and energy, because they could use it. And it hasn't been this warm in a while to take the hose out. So,
Perfect.
all
Segue
right,
aside, let's
get started. It is 10:01, so we can get started. So Elias is back. He's our most popular guest. We bring him back quarterly. This is the third one, which means we've been doing this for 9 months almost now.
Wow.
And so you're back to talk again about what's happening with the job market and hiring right now. For those that don't know him, he's a senior recruiter, senior director recruiter. I can't speak today at Quantix with over 20 years experience. He's helped over thousands of people be able to land roles, hundreds of PMs specifically. And yeah, don't forget that he also, right behind him, you see From a Recruiter's Brain, Elias Cobb. He has a book that he shares, and he goes on lives now and tries to, like, lives outside of ours, to share his own information and tips and tricks. So Elias, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me. I definitely appreciate it. And speaking of PMs, we did just place one today.
Nice.
So I just
Very nice.
scheduled to
Congratulations.
start for a PM. So not super high level, but the jobs do keep rolling in. So
that's a great point, and congratulations as well. Is around the demand of project management as it's increasing. We can see that there's a lot of job opportunities coming from various different levels, but we still see the involvement of AI in applications. So can you talk to us from both the perspective of the applicant going through and using AI, and also the hiring team and leveraging AI, how that dynamic is playing out, and what advice you can give for those who are trying to explore the job market right now?
yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I think the use of let's quickly start on the employer side. I think the use of AI by employers is less prevalent in terms of screening resumes and actually, ranking and doing any sort of meaningful candidate, ranking or screening on the back end. I think it's less prevalent than people think. It's out there. There's a lot of companies trying to sell it and push it, and I think there's a lot of noise around it, but I think there's less companies using it all the time than you might think. However, it does still exist. It is out there. I just don't think it's the majority of companies yet. Maybe it'll go there. I don't know. The biggest thing that I think people need to know is those AI tools are going to look at your resume pretty much the same as the human recruiter at that company would have looked at your resume, because that human recruiter trained the AI. They're the ones who, now, of course, it comes out of the box with some sort of training on it. But generally, you can go in and weight what you want to weight as a recruiter at that company. Like if you put a more weight on titles, or if you don't like people who are job hoppers, right, you can put weight on longevity. Or if you like people from certain universities, you can weight that. You can weight certain X companies. So the first lesson really is a lot of it you can't control, right? They're weighting it differently. Every company's different. You won't know necessarily how it's being weighted. You just got to sort of put your best foot forward. The second part of that is the use of AI on the candidate side. Now, I would recommend not using AI to apply for like 100 jobs at a time. I know it's a challenge to tweak your resume every time, but that's actually the best use of AI on the candidate side, right? Is have a resume, have a repository of duties, skills, accomplishments, right? Things that you've done that may or may not be applicable to each and every job. And you'll have to create them as you go, but then save them in like a master resume or a document that's like, here are all my skills, here are all my responsibilities, here are all my accomplishments. And then what you can do, and I've talked with people who do this, they go to like GPT or Claude or whatever, throw the job description in, throw in their resume, and throw in their master list. And they basically say, pick my bullet points from my master document, sub them into my resume so they match the job description. Do not change my verbiage, use my verbiage only, but swap them in for the appropriate points so my resume stays a certain length, right? And then you can apply for that job knowing you've done your best to hit those points and you're using your own language. To me, that's one of the best uses of AI as a candidate.
That's what I do. It significantly saves time. But a couple things to kind of flag with that. And then I want to dig more into the AI piece because I know you were excited to talk about it. Just covering that alone is not enough, right? Like I still am having to, even though I have a very strong prompt. Justin tells me I should sell it. But I have a very strong prompt. I've got a master resume of bullets. I also use common resumes for like common roles. So it also can pull some of that verbiage. But it still takes 4 or 5 optimizations and some looking at the job description and what it's populating for edits, because it still will miss some things. So that alone isn't just going to cover it. But you were starting to go somewhere that I think this is what you were talking about. So when we pinged you and said, what do you want to talk about this time? You were like, I want to talk about the surge of the fake or AI generated candidates, which I was like,
yes.
What? Like I had no idea, right? It started sounding like you were going there with like the automated job application thing, but what do you mean? What is going on? Because I was very surprised by this. I had never heard of it, and I help people build resumes.
So yeah, those actually, they are two different things. Like one, you can use some of these AI tools to just plug in like your main resume, and then it will go and apply for a whole bunch of stuff. And I'm not sure that it tweaks your resume or not. It might. I've never used one of them, but those tools are there, and those aren't necessarily fake candidates. They're just people using one resume for a ton of jobs, which I don't think is probably the best use of your time, even if it's limited time. The fake candidates, though, so what's happening, and I've seen it myself. It's people who are applying for jobs, and they're literally tweaking their resume and not writing it themselves, not using self-written bullet points, but they're literally basically saying, Claude, take this job description, write me a resume that matches all these skills, and then they apply with it. And some of them are maybe amping up their skills. So I wouldn't call them a fake candidate necessarily, but they're saying, nah, I've done more than I really have. And that, they're trying to get by.
Okay.
Embellishment, right? And they're using AI to pump up their resume. But there are people who are just absolutely, and this is especially on remote roles, who are not at all what they are claiming to be. And the worst of it is the North Korean bad actors, which has been a thing for a while. They aren't even trying to get a job. They're trying to literally get into somebody's system to then hack in and steal money. And it's a thing. It's a real thing. Yeah. And they'll use AI filters to do the interviews and AI question and answer, and they will get into a company and then they just steal IP, they embezzle money, they do whatever they can do in there. Then there are those who are just trying to get a job, right?
Yeah.
Who a lot of them maybe any job, and they're hoping they can fake their way through a few months or whatever. Some people are trying to get a second remote job, working multiple jobs at the same time, and things that they aren't actually skilled at. So, and this is important for people to understand. This is what you're up against. And this is why I talk about verifications on LinkedIn, having your picture on LinkedIn, being active on LinkedIn. And I'll give you an example. We had a job, and it was, this is what's funny. It was a hybrid job. It wasn't even going to be fully remote. And so we had some candidates we were talking to, and the last interview is an in-person interview, right? Obviously. So we had literally 6 people back out because there was going to be an in-person interview. And they all pushed really hard to just have a virtual interview process all the way through. And to all of us on my team, we're like, that is a giant red flag. If the person is in that city or says they are and refuses to go on site to do an interview. So either they aren't who they say they aren't where they say they are, or they're trying to get a multiple job, or sometimes you'll see the bait and switch where they think they can have somebody who maybe they'll have somebody else do a fake interview and that person will show up for the job who makes a lot less money and then gives them a cut of their paycheck. There's all kinds of scams going on. So candidates, you guys have to be aware that's what's happening. You have to fight against that. A lot of companies are very, very cautious about posting jobs now and getting applicants and resumes that look too AI generated. And this is why they don't want to hire one of these people and be the manager who brought in the fake candidate who either stole money, caused all kinds of harm, or whatever it is. So verify your LinkedIn if you can, at least get a picture up and have activity on LinkedIn, have connections, show you're doing something, because that's one of the tells you'll see with some of these fake profiles.
Yeah, because the activity thing I think is really key, because if we reverse this, what we see a lot, and I've had it, people try to reach out to me as well, are the fake recruiters.
Yeah.
Which is they have an account, they'll have a picture, they don't have tons of connections, or they recently created their account or something. They work for a company that if you click on it, it is a real company that you can see, and they say, hey, I have a job, you might be interested, send me your email, which at first I don't understand that. Like, you can send me the job description from DM. You already DM me. I don't know why they need my email to do that. And then if you send them your email, because I played with one of them, right? And now I've gotten from the same company. I've had 5 of them come in, right? Is as soon as I email them, I get a, hey, we'd love to bring you in for an interview. It's like, really? You didn't even send me the job description yet. You just invited me for the interview. So it's interesting, though, what you're saying about that. And I think, so watching out for scams, but also how are recruiters, from what you said about the candidates, if they're generating if fake candidates are being generated, and you said that's obviously a red flag, and it's making hiring managers hesitant, how are recruiters and hiring managers combating that, and how can candidates kind of combat that? Because now we're working against way more people, and we don't want to be considered as, we all use AI. We all use AI to help optimize our resume, no question, right? So how do we show that we're real?
So I do think, and it's one of the things I always talk about, is reaching out to somebody if you can, the recruiter or the hiring manager, directly via an email, I mean, or an in-mail if you can't find their direct email. That's one way you can stand apart, right? Because if you write a personalized email to that person, that's going to immediately set you apart. Nobody does it still. I mean, I don't, I know I haven't talked to that many people, but I know a lot of people have seen my, nobody does it. Still nobody does it.
That
I
sends you
get,
the email.
I
Oh,
post
yeah, you
jobs
gave that.
and nobody emails me, and my email is on my profile. You don't even have to be connected to me to find it. Nobody sends me
I
emails. I
think
get
your
like
recent
one.
post even had it, like with the one I reposted that said, "We're hiring. Email me directly." And I don't think anyone did.
Well, that PM one I posted, I probably got 3 emails
Wow.
on that.
So
What a great opportunity to
interesting.
like speak directly to the recruiter. That's crazy.
Yeah, and so that's one way you can absolutely set yourself apart, because the fake people aren't going to do that. They're just trying to put as many of those out as they can to try to get someone to bite, right? That's what they're trying to do. So that's the biggest way I think you can stand apart. The other is to make sure you have all the LinkedIn stuff. One of the guys in my executive group, he finally put his verification up maybe 3 weeks ago after I was banging on it. And he said literally 3 days later, a recruiter reached out to him with a job that he said it was a great fit. And the guy said, I never would have reached out to you if you didn't have a verification. He's got a picture. He's got a very long-term LinkedIn profile. He's been on there forever. He just never bothered to do it. And he was like, I'm glad I listened to you and did this, because that guy never would have reached out to me. Now, I don't know if he got the job, but
But you got
there
the
are
opportunity,
recruiters. There are recruiters who will say, if you don't have a verification, I'm not reaching out to you. I
That's
don't do
good to
that,
know.
but it is out there.
I've been
of,
very hesitant about doing the verification for over 5 years now when it
how
asked
come?
me to put like an ID and all of this
Oh,
together. And I was like, I don't need Microsoft to have that information. But it does talk about what all three of us have talked about before, which is LinkedIn. You can put anything on there. And if there's no validation process, then you're just another candidate in a sea of lies and let's call high pie in the sky candidates.
Well, and recruiters do it too, like you pointed out, Elizabeth. And we can talk about that more later if you want to. Because I see a question up here.
I
Yeah,
pulled it up because it
this
was
one's a good
relevant, but I've got
segue.
more
Yeah.
stuff on what you just said. But let's answer Chris's question first. So we talked about verification, but what else would you think is the most underrated section of the PM's LinkedIn profile that recruiters rely on?
So that's a really good question. I think I'm going to give a couple answers. I mean, the one that you can't control, right, is what we were just talking about, like the verification picture and the age of your profile. So if I click on anybody's name, it tells me when they created their profile in LinkedIn. So if somebody just created it this year, but they've got 20 years of experience, no verification, maybe no picture, I'm looking at that like, is this person real? They just got on LinkedIn and they haven't done anything else to really stand out, including looking at like activity. So that's one section. As far as your actual like experience and what you are trying to portray, I like titles, and I don't like them because I actually like them. I like them because that's what you see on LinkedIn, right? When I do a LinkedIn search, I only see your last 3 titles. So I like those to be lined up with what I'm looking for. But I think the headline is actually probably underutilized by a lot of people.
Yeah.
A lot, because that actually is one of the other things that shows up in a LinkedIn recruiter search. So on the back end, we see your name, your picture, your location, your headline, and your last 3 titles and companies, right? And the dates of employment, but everything associated with those last 3 titles. That headline is where you can put stuff that we will see in that list of 25 profiles per page that we have to decide based on this little blurb of snippet of information if we want to look at you in more depth. So that's where I think a lot of people don't use the headline. They put, something random that isn't really relevant or very little, just, senior project manager, which is fine. If I'm looking for a project manager and that says senior project manager, it's going to jump out at me. But I think people could utilize it a little more, especially with things like multiple options of titles, maybe program manager, project manager, things that they could consider. Industries would be huge, in my opinion, to put in there. Industry experience, especially in project management, is something that right now I see as a huge preference which means it's almost a requirement when there's a lot of candidates on the market. So if you can tell someone in that headline the industries you've worked in, again, if I'm going through a whole list of PMs, I got 180 in my results, and I'm looking for somebody in banking. If your headline says banking and I don't recognize the names of the companies, banking is maybe a bad example because most people recognize the banks. But you can say, hey, I have banking, I've got manufacturing, I've got whatever. And I can say, oh, I better look at this profile a little more closely because I didn't know these companies were in that field. So that's another way you could really use that, I think, in an appropriate way for every kind of job, not just project management.
I want to hone in on that for a second, and then I want to jump back to the emailing and then kind of switch gears because we've kind of hit on this for a while. But when it comes to LinkedIn, a few other things. The tagline also, if you can show your value prop, what makes you valuable, right? So delivers XYZ efficiency, value, whatever, right? Also, that background image, I feel like that's underutilized too. The background image should be almost an extension of what that headline is, because just like a resume, you get what, like 4 to 10 seconds or something when someone looks at it. LinkedIn's the same. Like, what do you first see to get them to keep scrolling? So I think that's really important. Another tip, and not everyone knows this, the more often, or as you refresh your LinkedIn, you populate more on the top search results, from my understanding. So making changes, even if they're minor changes, right, to your profile, it doesn't have to just be the headline or the background image, right? That kind of just gets you to, like, it again, it's kind of that activity. So you get rewarded for the activity. So I think I wanted to flag that too.
No, that's a good point, because in LinkedIn Recruiter, which is where recruiters search, right? We being recruiters, we cannot choose how the results are displayed to us. Every other job board, there's at least 2 options. Like Indeed gives me 2 options. It's their sort or recent activity. Monster Dice, you can do zip code radius, recent activity, last time the resume was updated, all kinds of stuff. You can always use their internal ranking. LinkedIn, it's just their internal ranking. And unless they explain it, right, I don't know how they choose why Elizabeth's resume shows up ahead of Justin's or vice versa. I just get a list. Half the time I'm on page 6 and I'm like, this person's the best fit of all of them, right? But it wasn't, LinkedIn didn't think it was, but who knows what that algorithm is. Part of it is absolutely activity, updating your profile, just making a change, saving it, and you can change it right back. But it's what that's doing is saying you're engaged in the job market, which means LinkedIn says, I'm going to display you more. Commenting, posting, doing something, they're going to reward you for that because you're using their product. The other thing too is the skills section. I haven't brought this up in a while, but you want those skills to be in the order of the things that the job you're going after. So if you're a project manager, your number 1 skill should be project management, and you can reorder those. And a lot of people don't know that. And that order has a bearing on the relevance of the
search,
the placement in the search.
And that should be updated even for your past roles. It should be what towards the job you're angling for as the top.
Correct. It's not your past roles necessarily. It's what you want to be considered for. Absolutely.
So,
and you can have 100 skills too. Sorry, Justin. They did up that maybe a couple years ago. So make use of them all.
So I see there's a question from Heather, but I also want to tackle one more element of AI before we transition over to the next topic.
You want me
The question, please.
Okay.
What makes you take a leap to look at the profile about section to see industries and other experience beyond your headline showing value? What is that driver to make you want to click into the profile, Elias?
Well, I honestly think for me and probably every other recruiter out here. What's that?
I was guessing you were going to say title.
Title. It's the titles and the length, and honestly, the length of employment. Right. I mean, if somebody has bounced around a ton, and this is somewhat client dependent, right? I do have managers that are like, I don't want a job hopper. So I already know I can't send someone who's had multiple jobs in the last 5 years, even though the market has sucked. I personally understand why some managers still don't grasp that and still aren't going to consider people who've had the misfortune of having to have a lot of jobs. Personally, I don't care. And if I'm working on contract jobs, especially, I don't care, right? That really is irrelevant. So, what I've said, all I see is your headline and your last 3 jobs. So, I do see your location. So if it's on-site or hybrid, but the other thing is those filters. You better select contract, on-site, hybrid, remote. You better select the ones that I would select all of them, right? Unless you absolutely refuse to go on site and will never do it no matter what. Well, don't put on site.
Yeah.
But those things are filters, right? And I go in and I don't ever use the on-site one, but I'm guessing some recruiters do. Full-time, contract, part-time, I 100% use those. Because if I'm recruiting for a contract, I'm going to start with people who've said, I will consider a contract. So that's something that it's not necessarily that shows up immediately in the take the leap, but it's going to weed you out where I'll never see your resume in the first place, right? So I think it's a combination of those factors.
Okay, and that's fair. And I think that's an important piece in this overall AI conversation. We talked about creating resumes, creating fake candidates, having the screening and using all of these different elements. But what we didn't talk about was the leverage of AI within an interview. We're seeing AI being used on both sides of the spectrum. Either people are unprepared to generate questions, to have a structured interview process, or you have candidates who are using AI to enhance their ability to speak more coherently in real time. Can you expand on both, if you would, please?
Well, on the second part first, don't do it. Don't do it. If you want to use AI to prepare for an interview, that's great, right? Use it to do research, use it to take the job description, throw it in, say, what are questions that might come up as a result of this job description? And then you can prepare answers. You could use it that way. Don't use those interview helpers where it's listening. We had this is another example. We had a candidate. My recruiter sat in on, we try to sit in on all our interviews. One of my recruiters sat in on the interview. He repeated every single question, except the rate yourself on these skills all the way through the interview. So I got off, I talked to Jim, my recruiter. He's like, he was using an AI tool. Absolutely. I mean, and we do video interviews. We do everything we can to try to make sure people aren't doing these types of things. But he said he was absolutely doing that. He was repeating the question so that his little AI thing could hear it better, make sure it got an answer. It shows up, right? There's usually either something like that, there's a pause, things like that really, really make it obvious. The AI filters, if a manager ever asks you to do this in an interview, don't take offense. That's one of the ways they can tell if you have an AI filter up interviewing, because one of my managers told me, if you get to about here, it jumps and populates the face in. And so they can tell if you're doing an AI generated interview avatar or whatever the heck it would be. I don't even know what it would be useful for. As far as the questions that are being generated, I think your best preparation is probably to do exactly what I said, because if they're not prepared on the client side, they're probably going to use it the same way you would. Dump the job description in and say, what are some good questions I should ask people? If you've done that on your side, you may actually be more prepared for a quote unquote AI generated interview than someone who didn't. I don't know how frequently companies are doing that. Recruiters, maybe like corporate recruiters who want to know what questions to ask. I don't know how often hiring managers are doing that. I just know a lot of people are terrible at interviewing, and managers, I'm not saying candidates, a lot of companies are terrible at interviewing, and
yes,
I'm not sure that's ever going to change. It's been like that for the 25 years I've been doing this.
So can you tell the difference? Because you mentioned they repeated the question, took a pause, and then answered. But what do? I have my pen handy. I write down the question. Sometimes I have them repeat it, or I repeat it back to them to make sure I'm getting it right, because I'm really bad at remembering what they ask, right? But it also gives me a second to calibrate my answer. And I also have notes. Like up here, these are categories with my stories next to them. Not the full stories, just the examples for me to pull up, right? It's a reference point. So as I write it down, I can look, I can go, oh, failures, mistakes, right there. There's 3 options to choose from. So can they tell the difference between the repeating for AI, or I mean, I really do just write the questions down. Like I'm not using AI because that would mess me up beyond belief. But
I think if they see you writing, right,
uh-huh.
too, if you're doing, that's going to be a clear tip off that you're not just saying it for your little AI interviewer that's going on over there. I also think it has to do with how you do it. If it's every single question, every single time,
Yeah.
that's something that, and the pause is a similar length every single time, right? Those are the things that we look for, even in our interviews. And we're not technical, but if I'm talking to somebody and they pause every time I ask a question, I'm kind of like, I'm not even asking something technical. I'm just asking you to tell me about like the last project you were on.
Yeah. Okay, so I want us to switch gears in 2 seconds. I want to come back to what we were talking about, the emailing the recruiter. I'm just going to kind of say something to add on to it, and then I'm going to switch us over. Because you talked about, again, email the recruiter if you can, or email the hiring manager if you can find them. Something you can absolutely do, and I did this recently. I don't stay in touch per se with old recruiters that I've worked with, but for example, I went through a couple rounds at a company, right? I did not get hired for that job. Another job popped up a few weeks ago. I emailed the recruiter. He remembered me. He was like, "Oh, well, you got ruled out for this thing." I was like, "Well, that's flexible." And he's like, "Okay." And he took my resume straight to the person. So I'd say keep those relationships. You can email old recruiters. I mean, it didn't work out. It wasn't a fit, but it doesn't matter. That relationship was there.
Yep.
I'd also say if you can't email, DM. I also did that recently. I DM'd a hiring manager. He never responded. He came back to me 2 days ago. He's like, "I have a new role." So you never know. So showing you're real, building those relationships, right? So I just kind of wanted to flag that. So it's not just on the initial, like build relationships network. But now I want to switch gears.
Well, let me chime in one other thing, because I do a lot of times when I send out messages, I just don't hear back, and I assume it's because people aren't interested in that role, which is fine. I don't take it personally, but if I were a candidate, I would respond to every legitimate looking recruiter that had a job in my field, right? Because if I send out one PM role and you're like, I'm not interested because it's on site and that rate's not high enough, I'm just not going to reply. I'm not building a relationship with you. If you reply and say, you know what, thanks for the message, blah, blah, blah. Here's my resume. I'm looking for these. I'm a lot more likely to remember you next time. Yeah. And I get those kinds of jobs because I contacted you about one in the first place. Mm-hmm. So that's the other thing with recruiters is stay in touch with people who to have these kinds of jobs.
Correct.
100%.
Because you never know.
Yep. Okay.
Yep.
So the first time we had you, we talked all about resumes. Second time we had you, we talked all about interviews. So it's time to start talking about offer negotiation. Let's go through the rest of the pipeline. So before we ask specific questions, and if you guys have questions, of course, please put them into the chat. Let's just get your general thoughts when it comes to negotiation strategies, where candidates can leverage certain things, before we kind of dive in specifics.
Yeah. I think, to me, one of the biggest misguided pieces of advice is always negotiate, right? Don't always negotiate, right? If you ask for X dollars and they come back and offer you exactly what you asked for, right, and everything else lines up, don't go back and ask for more. That doesn't play well. I've seen it happen numerous times, and I don't see the purpose. Like, if you wanted a higher salary, start out with the higher salary, because you can always come down. It's difficult to go up once you've quoted a number to a manager, a client, whoever. Now, if the job materially is different than what you knew originally, and that came out in the interview, and then they get to an offer, they offer you what you wanted, then it's fair to go back and say, hey, you know what? I know I said I'd take 150K, but I learned all this in the interview. It's going to be a lot more of this, this, this. Is there room for me to negotiate a higher salary because it is a more in-depth role than I thought originally, or something, something along those. That's fair. But if nothing really changes, if it's kind of the same thing and they offer you exactly what you asked for, I've seen people do that. And usually it's a no. And then you're starting off on a bad foot, kind of. Sometimes I've seen the offer actually companies say, you know what? Screw it. We'll just go with the next person who isn't going to complain about this money. So that's the first thing. You don't always have to negotiate everything. Now, if they're offering you less, right? Now this is what we're talking about. So I don't know if you want to get into specific questions. That was my one big thing I think people do sometimes, and they really shouldn't. They're shooting themselves in the foot if they're getting what they asked for. You don't have to negotiate everything.
So this is what I wanted to ask you specifically. There are times where when you apply for a role, they ask you for they provide the range and they say, but provide the number you want, right? What do you want in that? And the range they give you is a very small range. So you can choose between 10,000 in ranges, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've learned over time, and so have other candidates, that if you choose the range you actually want, sometimes the highest, they won't even bring you in because they just don't want to pay the highest. So if you're in a situation where you choose a range you think you could at least get an interview with, you have the interview with the recruiter, they tell you what you wanted is kind of high, right? But they're fine with it as long as it fits. And you kind of are like, I mean, I'd love higher, but that's what I thought would get me into the interview, right? I mean, you still gave them a number. So are you stuck with that number now?
Without a pretty good reason to go back to them,
you're stuck with the number.
You might be stuck with that number. And that's somewhat market dependent, right? It's because of where we are right now. A lot of companies are looking at it like, well, we don't want to pay the top. We don't have to pay the top, and we can have other choices if we want to. So I think, again, you kind of have to feel that out a little bit as you go, right? You have to kind of feel out how reasonable do these people sound. I do think it's important, if there's anything in the job that comes out, and almost always there is, right, that's more complex, more in depth, more requirements than what they said, that does leave you some leverage to say, and the nice thing, I guess, with this is that leverage doesn't sound bad. So they may still come back and say, well, we don't want to pay the top, so you're stuck at 140 instead of 150. But if you just went and said, hey, I want 150 now, that doesn't come across very well. I know I said 140, but now I want 150. But if you say, you know what, I know I said 140, but I learned X, Y, and Z, it's a little more in depth. Is there a chance I could get 150 because now I know the job's a little more complicated? That just sounds better. They still may say no, but it does play a little better to someone's ear.
It has
right?
some facts or objectives and logic that's layered in instead of being greedy and trying to pull more leverage.
What about
which is fair. You should get as much as you can, but you have to play the game a little bit, unfortunately.
You do, because you're working in a marketplace that's global, especially in remote roles. And I think there are some questions that we'll tailor towards that in a bit, but I think you wanted to say,
I want to follow up on that and just ask, what about if you switch gears and you go, I know we're kind of stuck here, what about sign-on bonus or something like that? I mean, could you still, to get that more money to kind of cover the bases until you can hopefully get a raise or something? Although you never
absolutely
know if you get a raise.
No, those are all things that those are things you can ask for, right? There's certain things that sign-on bonus. I've seen people successfully negotiate like a position review in 90 days or 180 days, something a little sooner than maybe normal, where they could evaluate you and see if you could get a raise at that point based on what you've proven. Certainly the potential of maybe more vacation time, more PTO, depending on what the company's policies are. Big companies, you're probably not getting away with that. They have pretty much everything tiered, right? And it's difficult for them to change that.
Yeah, actually, Elias, can you expand a little bit? People who are not familiar with the hiring process, about band levels and how there's not a lot of negotiation room for certain situations because it's either by title or experience or some other markers.
And you'll hear that a lot. They'll say bands or internal equity, right? Those are the words that you will hear. And that means basically this job is a senior project manager. Senior project manager has a range of 120 to 140,000 at our company. You will not get more than 140,000 for that job come hell or high water. There is no way, because that's the band that they're hiring. They would have to create an entirely new position for you and get approvals all the way up to whoever if they were going to pay you more to put you into the senior project manager 2 or whatever the next level is, right? So that's what, when we say bands, that's what we're talking about. The other flip side of this, and I have at least 3 clients who do this, they will have a band and then they say, we never start anyone more than the midpoint. So they'll tell me our range is 90 to 110. And then in my head, I'm like, I am not going to tell anyone the range is above 100K, because I know for sure this company will never, ever offer more than 100K for this position because it's the midpoint of the band.
I know a company that does the starting point. I've done the interview and the range totally works. And they're like, because we want to promote you and give you raises throughout, you're starting at the lowest in the range. And I'm like, then why am I here? So,
that's the excuse. I think they've maybe convinced themselves of that. I'm not sure that's always the case, right? It's like, move me to the next roll up then. Or you know what? In 3 years, if I've never gotten a raise, but I was making the max the whole time, I'm going to be a hell of a lot happier than if I was making the minimum and got a 1% cost of living increase. Like, just give me the max and I'll say, fine, no raises till you promote me. Fine. Yeah. Like, it doesn't make sense just from a logical perspective. It's just their excuse to say, this is why we never want to pay more than this and blah, blah, blah. So those are the bands. That's also, smaller companies will have internal equity, even if they don't have quote unquote bands defined. They'll just say, we don't have any senior software engineers or senior PMs who make more than 140K. So we're not paying you more than 140 because no one else gets it.
Right.
That's the other thing you run into.
Do a whole reevaluation of their total rewards.
Well, if it got out,
yes.
If it got out, Justin, to your point, then all the other senior PMs are going to be like, well, wait a minute, I've been here 7 years. Why are you giving this guy this money? You should have given it to me. And it causes problems. So they don't do it.
Do you have, sorry, I want to follow up on this question because this is just curiosity for me. Elias, have you seen for your clients that they'll interview someone for a role and then they'll find out that they want to keep the talent, and despite that they're not able to give that certain leverage for that band level because they're locked in, that they will recreate the role or get an approval for additional budget or anything of that sort? Is that, I know that's rare, but is that an actual reality?
I've seen it. It's again, I think it's not the common way that things happen, but if someone, and especially I think smaller companies, small to mid-size, where they have more flexibility and less layers of people that have to approve stuff, that you'll see that happen more frequently. Where they say, man, we really like Justin. He's too expensive for this, and we know that. We'll just figure something else out. That is the other time that if they came back to you and said, we tried to figure it out, we couldn't make the salary work, you could say, well, could I get a signing bonus that makes it up for the first year at least? And now maybe next year we talk about a raise or talk about a new position, or maybe they just, the economy's different and they can create that role at that point.
How do you go about
caution?
That? Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Justin.
Sorry. And then I'm going to hand it to you. I promise.
Okay,
one caution, that I've experienced this before. I've gotten the sign-on bonus and it was based on the tier level of the band. But then you find out the performance reviews and all of that, they cap the amount that can be raised on an incremental level for your salary for performance reviews and all of that. How do you overcome that you're locked in that band, but you still want to work for that company? And often you find this out after the fact.
I mean, really, you'd probably have to try to figure out what other roles there are and if you can shoehorn yourself over to a different band. I mean, and this is a big problem just in general. This is why
correct. Internal versus external. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've told people, I'm like, show me somebody who's been at a company for 12 years in IT, and I'll show you somebody who's making 20% less than the people who haven't. You know, so it's a balancing act between not looking like you jump around too much, but maximizing your earning potential. Because internally, like you said, Justin, it's hard to get much more than 5% or 3% or whatever. But when the market's good and you switch jobs, you can easily get 10% or more as a raise. But you do that too much, and then companies will look at your resume and go, man, this guy never sticks around.
Yeah, you know, I got a 60% raise once, total reward. So I get it.
Yeah. I got a 10% raise once. That was an insult, let me tell you.
So you definitely have to balance those things, right? And decide, is it worth me looking? But to your point, I'm not sure you can get around that. I think the way most people do it is they have to find a different role in that company in a different band that they can,
Correct. They're
when they see
locked.
something open, they jump over to that level. Yeah.
Okay. E, I'm going to hand it to you, and then
Yeah.
I'll wait for the last 3 questions that are interview, international applicants, and general advice.
So yeah, I'm going to do one follow-up, and then we can answer the questions, and then we still need to get to the DII stuff. So we're going to kind of start skimming through these things a little bit faster, but we always could go overtime with you. Like our conversations, I mean, they're great conversations. So the one thing I wanted to add though is you talked about how if you're kind of locked into that range, then you can't really ask for more. We talked about asking for either a sign-on bonus, or maybe you're not locked in a range because they give it to you, but there's flexibility. What, aside from what you said of the role is more than I thought it was, what are some factors that we can include to try to get that higher range? Because some people say, oh, well, I'm certified. Well, that the requirements already ask for you're certified, or oh, you're this. So it's like, how do we actually win that over? Because you never really, no one's ever going to want to say you did better than every other person ever who interviewed, and that's why we're putting you at the highest. They're never putting you at the highest. So how do we ask for that? How do we approach that? Justify.
I mean, that's a really good question. I think things like you mentioned, certifications, if they're not on the requirement list, or extra certifications you have that are relevant but weren't in the job description. Advanced degrees, or any degree, if it's not in the job description. If a master's wasn't required and you have one, that's often a reason you could, they may not care, but these are just things you can ask about, right? I mean, that's really all you can do. Or years of experience. You guys wanted 5+, I've got 12. Is that worth anything? I think having some sort of justification is probably the key, because then it doesn't just come across like, hey, give me more money because your range is higher. It comes across like, hey, I feel like I'm bringing more to the table, or you've asked more from me. Is there a way we can negotiate? I think the thing that cuts through all of this, though, the last piece with offers, please, think of where you are in life and jobs at this point in time before you go too crazy on this stuff.
Yeah.
If you've got a job offer and you really need to get back to work, don't mess around. Take the job, right? Unless they're lowballing you to the point where it's unpalatable, or there's something that you just can't do. But if the job's in the range and you'd consider it, it's probably paying better than unemployment. And there's nothing that says you can't keep looking, right? There's nothing that says you can't keep looking. So don't shoot yourself in the foot right now when the market isn't that great.
That's the part that kills me. And I know it kills so many people who are listening right now, is that you just might not have a choice, and you're worth more, but it's a market. So if that's the
unfortunately,
it's definitely an employer-driven market.
Thank you.
Now.
That's the way to say it, not a market.
That's the word you were looking for. I got it.
It absolutely is right now. Yep. In a lot of fields.
So before we jump into the DAI, God, I can't speak today, DEI stuff. Let's go to the questions in the comments really quick, so we can make sure we're speaking to our audience here. Yep. So the first one is, I think it's the international one. I'm just looking for it to highlight.
There's one above it.
There is? From who?
Yeah, a Bibian. So I'm going to read it out to you. Okay. Yeah. And this is something I'm curious about, Elias, is it a red flag if the interviewer or the panel are not taking notes when the person is being interviewed or talking? And how do the panel members remember the key points that are taken within the interview process?
Well, I mean, these days there could be a note taker somewhere, right, that you may not notice, or something. So I wouldn't necessarily read much into that. I guess I wouldn't take it as a red flag. Everybody has different interview styles when they're doing them. And like I said, a lot of people at companies are not good at interviewing and don't interview all that often, right? Sometimes people are pulled into interviews and they only interview once a year, right? I mean, so they're like, I don't know, I'm just asking some questions. So they may not have a process. They may not take notes. They may just kind of rely on their feelings, right? Or they're thinking somebody else is taking notes, or who knows. So I wouldn't. With all of these things, I just wouldn't read anything into it. And a lot of people in interviews, a lot of managers are very like stone-faced. They don't give anything away. Don't read anything into that either. And a lot of them do that for everybody. They don't, it's just how this is their affect. So try not to get thrown off by it is my best advice. Don't take it personally. Just think this is how they interview. I'm going to roll with it.
They could just debrief right after the panel as well. So
Correct.
then it's immediate. So, but I think it's important. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just saying a lot of transcription with AI now. You don't need to always take notes because it's being recorded or transcribed for you.
Yeah. All right. Next question. Thank you, Elias.
How can international applicants best position themselves for international roles? What do you look out for when you see applicants outside of the job location, but the job requirements state anywhere?
Well, what I will say is most jobs that are posted, I think at least in the United States, typically want someone in the United States. I mean, I think it's pretty rare that a company, with US based operations will post a job and then hire someone who's not in the country. I'm guessing that may be similar in other countries too, right? Even if they say remote from anywhere, they usually mean within the country that they're in. So that's going to be difficult if you're trying to, apply for jobs that say remote from anywhere, a US job, and you're not in the United States. I mean, I'll tell you, in LinkedIn, the default setting when I go to post a job is auto reject people, and it does sends a rejection note. Auto reject people who are outside of the country that you've posted this job in. So that's the default setting. So if I just didn't pay any attention, I was just clicking through, that's automatically going to be put on the job posting. And I suspect that's how it is for most companies. So really, unfortunately, your best advice is to be in the country that you're trying to get the job in. It's difficult. I know plenty of companies who just will not employ someone out of the country. They just won't.
But I think when it comes to offshore talent, for example, for global companies, is there going to be any kind of specific things that international applicants should be looking for to highlight?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, they'll post that job as being in that location, is what I would guess. I don't know. I mean, to me, if it's the same types of people looking for those jobs, they're probably going to look at the resume and the process pretty similarly to, how they review a resume and the process in the United States. I think the key is being in that country, right? I mean, if you're talking states and it's an on-site job and you're trying to get to that state or you're willing to move, you need to write to the recruiter again or the manager and say, I applied for this. I'm not in that state, but I'm willing to move myself. Because again, I don't know that. If you just send me a resume, now we got to go back and forth. It's much easier if you tell me up front, I'll move myself to Colorado. I know it's on site. I'm willing to go. Tell me that.
Mm-hmm. All right. Next one for Justin. Sorry, I'm moving us through because we started getting a lot of questions now. So.
No, you're good. I think Precious, we'll take this one offline. We'll follow up after the end of the call because I think breaking into project management, volunteering isn't really related to the topic for the hiring process, but we have some great advice that we'll give you between the three of us. I think that'll be helpful.
Okay, moving on.
Arpita, how is PMO looking role in the future? Okay, so this is related to the marketplace. I'm not sure I agree with the statement. That's
I would agree with you, Justin. I'm seeing plenty of PM jobs. I'm seeing more of those than software developers to some extent. So correct. I'm not sure that the PM role is shrinking that much.
I think it stems from either the Scrum Master discussion that we had in one of our previous episodes, Elias, or more along the lines of AI being blended and saying that take the project management role, which I feel vehemently against. And AI in terms of project management is very limited because of the data that's being used and how information is passed in projects. So I agree with you. And I think Elizabeth definitely agrees that the PMO and PM roles are not shrinking, they're expanding, but maybe the responsibilities are being enhanced for more modern technologies. And personally, I think roles and responsibilities should be focused to business acumen. So business processes, business decision making, and understanding how a business operates. And that's why we emphasize so strongly at PM Career Growth these skill sets to set you apart in this marketplace, because that's not talked about enough. And that's the key to success.
I'll add, though, that because you used the word shrink in the idea that the roles are going away, and Elias, you and I were chatting about this the other night. I feel like there are more people than the market has jobs.
Period.
So keep it as simple as that. Like, there's just not enough roles out there and so many candidates. They just had, how many companies just announced all these layoffs? It's just, so it feels like it's shrinking, but it's just the candidate pool is too big compared to the job pool.
Unfortunately, yes.
So we have 7 minutes. I guess we can always do the DEI one next time, or we can keep going through questions.
I think DEI is going to tie great into the bias conversation that Bibian is noted, because I think we can talk about bias in more detail in a later episode. As Elias, you and Elizabeth and I can definitely talk about bias in the entire process. We talked about it in previous episodes, and we can direct it.
Well, okay, so we're saving Bibian's next question in DEI for the next time Elias comes back, and we're moving to the next question. If you came for DEI specifically, because that was a note, ping us and we'll talk to you about what we want to talk about. Okay, moving to the next question then, and can you take a note, Justin, to write down Bibian's question for our next call? All right, Chris, are you seeing a trend where recruiters are prioritizing evidence of emotional intelligence and interpersonal capability alongside technical PM skills? Oh, Elias went through that with me specifically.
Well, I mean, I would say that I don't even know it's prioritizing. It's always been there. I mean, if I interview a PM, and again, being an agency recruiter, I'm not the ultimate decision maker, but if somebody comes across like my way or the highway, or that they doesn't feel like they're good at building consensus and the things that really are critical to being a good PM, I'm not going to submit them. And I think that's a pretty common. I mean, one of the questions I ask PMs a lot over the years is, how do you build consensus? How do you get someone who doesn't report to you to listen to what you're asking them to do? And I think any good PM should have an answer to that, right? Because that's to me anyway, that seems like the worst part of project management is you've got all these people that you have to get to do stuff and they don't report to you. So they've got their manager telling them to do one thing, the director something else, and then you, the PM, who have no actual pull over them, asking them to do something else. Who are they going to listen to? So you have to be really good at that. And I think that's that emotional intelligence that a lot of companies are looking for. And I've had some great answers over the years. I've had people give me, like one person said, I had a guy who hated to fill out expense reports. So I said, you know what? I'll fill out all those expense reports for you if you'll do this for me. And I'm like, okay, the barter system, whatever works, but you have to have a good answer for that, I think. And that is, to me, critical, but it always has been.
No, I think that's why there's behavioral interviews, because that's not something that you can get into the resume. The resume is more around skills, capability, and experience. But then the logic, the emotional, the tenacity, the resilience, the grit, all of that comes through in the behavioral questions. But I think, go ahead, sorry.
Well, I was going to say, and that's why AI will have a hard time replacing project managers ever, right? Is because so much of it is a personal relationship with the delivery people.
Yeah,
exactly. I think it would be helpful if, and we at least touched on the DEI piece that you and Elias talked about previously in the application process, and make sure that people understand how that plays into bias and being given an interview or not.
Do we have time? We only got about 4 minutes here.
I think,
we can try. So my question to Elias, when we fill out applications, we are asked about our gender. Are we a veteran? Do we have a disability? What race are we? What sexual preferences we have? I mean, it's ridiculous how crazy that's getting.
Yeah.
And I asked you a few days ago or a few weeks ago, right? And I was like, kept saying, I'm not answering. I don't have a disability. I'm not answering a veteran. I'm just not answering anymore because it's not their business, right? And you were like, well, maybe being a white female is still a minority. Maybe it helps. So I kind of wanted your thoughts on what you've seen from hiring managers of kind of, what should we put at this point? They're just asking questions that, quite frankly, they really don't need to know. But
Yeah. So I think especially in bigger companies, a lot of this stuff doesn't see the light of day, or it's not supposed to, right? They're collecting EEOC information behind the scenes. And it shouldn't be presented to the recruiter or the hiring manager or anybody. That's the rule, I think. I don't know how much that happens. Based on my years of experience doing this, I would be cautious about putting much down in the disability category, just because I have actually heard of companies not wanting to make accommodations, so they avoid people for whom they would have to, right? Like, if we hire this person, we've got to accommodate them because that's the law, so let's just not hire them.
yeah.
So I that one I would be cautious of, only because I think that is the biggest chance for bias right out of the gate. The other questions, sexual, I would just put, I'm not answering that on that one, because I don't see, I've never heard of that one actually being a thing. Now, being from minority groups, I definitely have clients who have said, we want to see X percentage of your submittals being from what we classify as minority populations. Mm. So I guess I don't think anybody's like anti-DEI. I mean, at least overtly. I think there's companies who are like, we're not going to consider it, but I don't know that they're saying we are going to actually actively discriminate against people in certain classes. And honestly, if they were, do you want to work there, right? You probably don't. But I think there are still plenty of companies who do want representation from a variety of different classes, whatever that is. And so answering those questions is probably not a terrible idea, like gender, race. I wouldn't answer anything about religion or sexual orientation myself, but I think the other ones also, they're going to draw some conclusions when they see your LinkedIn picture or do an interview anyway. So, I mean, some of that stuff they're going to figure out. I think those other ones I'd probably stay away from.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you so much for that. Yes, I saw a question about ages, and that's an issue right now in the market. Guys, we're out of time. We'll have Elias back in a couple of months. He's a recurring guest because everyone loves him, and he's an amazing guest. We love having him. He is looking for ideas for potentially a sequel for that book that's behind his head there, From a Recruiter's Brain. So if there are top topics that you don't see things on, please ping him and let him know what you want to hear about, because I'm not telling you that he's writing it right now. I think it's a thought, but give him ideas. And worst case, he can always get on a live and make sure he's answering your questions. Elias, where can people find you?
Well, LinkedIn, obviously, but I also do have I put up a YouTube that I'm starting to put a little bit of stuff on. Yeah. I can't remember I'll reply to this post later with the link. I don't have much on there yet. I just think just a couple lives and a video or two that I've put out, but I'm starting to do a little bit of stuff on there too.
Everyone's going to love that. So yes, everyone, please let us know what you want to know from Elias. We'll get your YouTube shared out as well. We might have to have you back sooner than 3 months from now, but
that's fine. I'm always up for it.
As always, thank you so much to everyone else. I think our next live is April 3rd. We haven't announced it yet. I think it's with Patricia Bravo. It's all on emotional intelligence communication. We'll see you guys next time. And as always, Elias and Justin, stay on as I end the stream. Thank you guys so much for having us for this hour in your offices and your homes.
Thanks, everybody.